If you've ever wondered what heavy means in context of Final Fantasy V, this is for you. Most enemies are flagged with some kind of attribute, most of which can be exploited heavily to your benefit. So I'll just skip the intro spiel and start right off with heavy. Which, to begin, no, I have no idea why it's called heavy. It has nothing to do with size or weight. It does a bunch of various things, but the two most important functions are this. It makes you immune to fractional damage sources like gravity, Deathclaw, missile, and the like, and it makes temporary debuffs such as silence and stop last such a short amount of time that you might as well be immune to them. It does not necessarily make you immune to instant death, because you can look at Boat Gilgamesh and the barriers. They are heavy, but can be killed by the Death Scythe and Break Spellblade respectively. Death, Break, and Banish are their own debuff immunities that any enemy needs, but most heavy flagged targets will also have immunity to those, so the Venn diagram is pretty close to being a circle. There are some exceptions, like making Aga Spellblades do a bunch of damage instead of instantly killing when hitting a weakness, making undead targets immune to revive-based insta-kills, or immunity to extremely rare skills like Encircle and Doom, but for the vast majority of examples, they're still vulnerable. Also, level 5 death kills you regardless of heaviness or immunity, assuming the level works out. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Katobopass and Omniscient are examples of heavy targets with debuff vulnerabilities. The former can be frozen with Stop Song, but unless you attack literally immediately afterwards with no delay, you're going to be hit with a break counter. The latter can be cheesed with Silence Blade, since debuffs are guaranteed with Spellblade assuming no immunity, but trying the same strategy with the Silence spell or Mage Masher is horrendously impractical, and you'd be better off waiting his MP out with Reflect Rings. Something fun to mess around with is the Dragon's Kiss mix from the Chemist. With Maiden's Kiss plus Dragon Fang, you can force a target to become flagged with Heavy and Dragon. You can use this on yourself for the immunities, or use it on enemies to make dragon weapons more effective, but I'll get into that later. The weirdest thing about Undead in this game is how many enemies are undead and aren't immediately identifiable as such. If you've played other Final Fantasies, or even just other RPGs before, you probably know what's up with the undead. Weak to fire, weak to holy, healing spells damage them, revive moves can insta-kill, unless they're heavy as mentioned, instant death moves fully heal them. For that last one, it does have to be instant death specifically. Banish or break will still kill them like normal. Less obvious things include drain effects like Drain and Osmos having reverse effects on you, and still being able to be healed by White Wind. That part is relevant due to the potential of inducing undead on party members through either wearing the Bone Mail from Drakenvale, or being a Necromancer. Or using the Necromancer's undead passive, I guess, but I see very limited use for that. Importantly, the Bard does very well against undead, with the Apollo's Harp doing ridiculous single target damage to dragons and undead, and their Requiem spell doing high damage exclusively to undead for 0 MP. Staff users can also use the Sage's Staff for huge undead damage, but it isn't as high, and most staff users usually have better things to do than going bonking zombies. Either way, while it's kind of a toss-up on whether being undead yourself is a good thing or not, the immunities provided are selectively pretty handy, and taking advantage of an enemy's undead status is pretty easy. As far as I can tell, the dragon type only exists to be exploited by dragon-killing weapons, i.e. the Apollo's Harp, Dragon's Whisker, and Dragon Spear. Sounds very limited in use, but credit where it's due, there's a lot of endgame dragons that are both dangerous and potentially profitable. The Crystal Dragon has the rare steal be the Spear, and can also have elixir stolen from it. Shinryu is one of the bonus bosses and is the easier way to obtain the Dragon's Whisker, and the top left segment of Neo Exdeath is a dragon, which, funny enough, also has a Dragon Spear as a rare steal. As mentioned a couple paragraphs ago, the Dragon's Kiss mix forces heavy and dragon type onto the target, meaning you can cause any monster to be exploited for free crit damage. Similar to Dragon, and expect this trend to continue, the Desert type exists purely to be exploited by Aqua Breath for a massive ×8 damage multiplier, potentially explaining why it costs so damn much. In a truly perplexing decision, the Dorm Chimera, the most infamous user of said move, is not actually Desert type, despite being exclusively found when the background looks like this. Same for Ankeg and Ammonite, and all three of these guys would be fantastic use cases for this ill-fated blue spell, but no, we need level 3 Flare to be even better. Almost every other desert enemy is weak enough to not need to worry about it. For me, I exploit the Sandworm's desert tag, then shelve it for the rest of the playthrough. Going 3 for 3 with exists purely to be exploited for damage, the Avian type takes extra damage from the Avis Killer Bow, the Common Steel and Rare Drop from the Tote Avis. There's no real logic to how that attribute is divvied out. I'm just gonna list them all on screen. You'd think the Zoo would be an Avian considering it's the original sprite of a couple of these guys, but no. Granted, by the time you have this bow it's gonna be one shot anyway, but it's the principle. Something important, even though all the Avian enemies are called that and have wings, that doesn't guarantee an immunity to earth attacks. No, I don't get it either, but I've stopped asking questions about the attributes at this point. Okay, aerial isn't actually an attribute, but this is probably the best chance I'll have to talk about this. Most winged enemies that aren't labeled as avian have a dramatically increased evasion chance against quote-unquote melee attacks. Weapons like swords and knives will incur that dreaded whiff sound more than not, but weapons labeled as aerial have a 100% hit rate against them, those being all bows, all whips, the Rising Sun Boomerang, and Thor's Hammer. For whatever reason, the Moonring Blade Boomerang isn't classified the same as its sibling. I went to go double check after reading that on the wiki, and yeah, sure enough. In Pixel Remaster, along with the perfect accuracy, these weapons were buffed to also do bonus damage against aerial targets, a nice feature for otherwise typically ignored weapons. Also, similarly to Avian, just because you have wings doesn't necessarily mean you're auto-immune to Earth. It's still a good assumption to have, since you'll never be bitten in the ass for not using Titan against a bird, but 5's weird inconsistencies do not start or end with what is not considered flying but has wings. Magic beasts once again get exploited for damage, this time by the Artemis Bow and Beast Killer Whip, but is also the centralizing factor in making the Beastmaster's Calm ability function, which is more or less a monster-specific stop for 0 MP. There's a ton of Magic Beast enemies throughout the game, so just having these weapons on you during World 3 won't fail you, but considering the earliest beast killer you can get is in the Island Shrine and the Artemis Bow in Istory Falls, it might be a little late to care. The most important magic beast enemy to be aware of is the Almagest section of Neo Exdeath, the lower right one, so Beastmaster and Ranger parties could definitely go nuts on that. And on Calm's usefulness, it notably has selectively more utility in GBA, where it's bugged to only work on non-magic beast enemy types, so go nuts. And we end things off with the human attribute, once again being purely for damage dealing, this time by the Man-Eater Knife. This knife, only being obtainable at the end of the final dungeon, or a rare steal from an Istory Falls enemy if you're demented, and is Dancer only, is seriously dumb as far as availability goes, although when I think about it, Thor's Hammer isn't much better. GBA's Cannoneer also has a combine that mixes a shot type with a Fuma Shuriken to do a full party attack that does big damage to humans. But seriously, a Fuma Shuriken? You know how rare and expensive those are? You're better off just throwing it raw, no combinations necessary. I'll be fair and say that the lower left part of Neo Exdeath is human type, but that's also the segment that lacks a heavy flag, so it'll only be practical to abuse if you're foregoing the magic lamp for some reason. Still, it could be good to know. If there's one takeaway I want you to have from this video, it's someone please try and figure out why it's called heavy. I want to know. I need to know. I don't need to know, but I want to know.